Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back. Great to see you on this Thursday. I've got a big update for you on what is shaping up to be a very impactful and potentially impacts that could be long lasting here through sections of the Carolinas, Southeast, and Mid-Atlantic going into this weekend and into early next week. The overnight model runs have definitely come into, I don't want to say more agreement, but definitely continue to solidify the fact that we are likely to see a very impactful storm system here within the next couple of days. And this is one that I think might catch a lot of people off guard, honestly, just due to kind of the quiet week that we've had. And I know we had a big storm system last weekend, so I think a lot of people might have kind of let their guard down a little bit here. But I'm telling you, we're going to see some really big time impacts, likely worse than what we saw last week in this part of the country. Now, if you haven't already subscribed, definitely consider doing so, and make sure to hit that bell for the latest notifications every time I upload a video. And of course, if you like the video, hit that like button and consider sharing it with somebody that you might know in this part of the country that could probably use some of this information. Also, if you are new to the channel, definitely comment. Let me know where you're watching from, as that always helps me plan these videos out. Okay, with that said though, let's go ahead and jump into that forecast. So we're going to start off here with our water vapor loop, and you'll notice we already have kind of some interesting stuff ongoing here that is really a precursor to what is likely going to be a very big time storm here in just a couple of days. So we have this big kind of upper level low system that kind of got cut off from the jet stream a couple days ago. That is swinging on through the Four Corners region right now and bringing with it a lot of rain and snow down to sections of New Mexico, Colorado, Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas today, and that will continue throughout the next day or so. We also have a bit of kind of a very active section of the subtropical jet stream down here. That is going to provide another piece of energy that is going to combine with this upper level low and a piece of a clipper system up in Canada. All three of these are going to work in tandem over the next couple of days and eventually form into one really big storm somewhere over the southeast. And that is what is going to lead to that very impactful storm going into this weekend. Now, taking a look at current radar imagery as well as our watches and warnings out there, you'll notice overall not all that much is going on out there, especially east of the Mississippi River, where really not anything's showing up on radar and we don't have anything in the way of watches or warnings. Now, again, things are different back here towards New Mexico, Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, and Colorado, where we do have plenty of winter weather advisories and winter storm warnings up for this storm system that is continuing to crank away here and pulling up plenty of Gulf moisture with it, allowing to see some of that snow falling in these higher elevations and rain in those lower elevations. And that general storm system will continue to kind of strengthen throughout the day today and bringing with it plenty more rain and snow depending on where you are watching from. Okay, so just kind of a game plan here. I'm going to start off by showing the East Coast over the next 48 hours. You will notice during this time period a lot going on in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. I'm going to dive more in depth on that in just a second, but for everyone else, just to kind of quickly fly through the next couple of days here. This afternoon, again, really quiet. We have very strong high pressure anchored over the eastern United States, and you'll notice we almost are getting kind of a ring of fire pattern around this. This is something we often see during the summertime, actually, but we're almost getting that same general idea where kind of under that high pressure, very calm, nice kind of average weather, but on the outside we're having these waves of precipitation move around. And that's going to lead to a general theme of some showers and maybe even a couple rumbles of thunder over the Florida Peninsula over the next 48 hours or so, and also plumes of moisture kind of being grabbed up out of the Gulf and thrown into the Great Plains and eventually around and potentially into sections of the Great Lakes region. So that's just kind of the general idea going through today, as you see on your map here, into overnight tonight, and even into our Friday afternoon. You'll notice here comes that second kind of plume of moisture out of Canada. This is actually that clipper system I was talking about that is going to also help to really form the storm down in the Gulf in kind of some very interesting meteorological ways. Okay, excuse me. So this is Friday afternoon. Again, you'll notice we've got that rain around this high pressure, everything under it and everybody under it still dealing with overall really nice conditions. But we do have to watch for, again, that clipper system up into sections of Wisconsin and Michigan going into our Friday, overnight Friday, and into our early Saturday morning. That could definitely bring with it some rainfall or snowfall, depending on exactly where you are on the map here. But either way, it looks to be pretty light precipitation, so I wouldn't expect major impacts out of that storm system. However, in the same time period, going into overnight Friday and Saturday, you'll notice this plume of moisture continues to grow on the outer periphery of this high pressure system. So definitely watching for some showers to move on through sections of Arkansas, Missouri, down towards Louisiana through the early morning hours of Saturday. And you'll even notice here at the very bottom of your screen, here's our storm system starting to get its act together in the Gulf as it kind of works with multiple pieces of energy. Okay, so let's kind of move this map on over to where we're currently seeing a little bit more of that active weather back towards Texas, New Mexico, and Colorado. Right now, again, you'll notice we're seeing plenty of higher elevation snow falling out towards New Mexico and southern Colorado, but we're even going to see some of that snow change over, or that rain change over to snow this afternoon through sections of western Kansas, potentially into the Texas and Oklahoma panhandle as well. Now, as I move this ahead throughout this afternoon, continuing, to, move the map ahead, you'll notice we continue that transition of some heavy rain to some heavy wet snow overnight tonight, again, in the Texas and Oklahoma panhandle here. And this is also about the time that I would expect precipitation to get kind of cut off here from Colorado and New Mexico. So things should taper off on that side of things going into the overnight, while things then pick up and turn a little more wintry back towards again, the panhandles and into western Kansas. Now, by the time we're waking up tomorrow morning, there could be a little bit of snow left over in those same regions, but most of that precipitation is now shifting off towards the east, and we really just have some good old-fashioned rain here through sections of central Oklahoma, Kansas, and north central Texas through the early morning hours of Friday, and that rain will continue to slowly push off to the east throughout the day Friday, eventually getting into eastern Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas by the time the sun is setting Friday evening. And then, as we talked about on Saturday, that shield of precipitation then moving closer towards the Mississippi River Valley. Okay, so we do still have some snowfall on the way for some of these regions. Again, I think 1 to 3 inches of snow still pretty likely here into the extreme northern Texas panhandle, down into the western Oklahoma panhandle, and into southwestern Kansas. Again, still the possibility of 1 to 3 inches of snow falling out of that. As for these higher elevations of Colorado and New Mexico, could still see 3 to 5 inches, maybe even half a foot towards a foot on those highest peaks, but again, that precipitation will begin to wind down going into overnight tonight as that storm system pulls off towards the east. Okay, so that's what we've got right now. Let's kind of take a bit of a break here and talk about the rest of the plan for this video, because the entire rest of this is going to be dedicated to this weekend storm system. Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about are kind of our latest models and what they show in terms of our relative vorticity. I show this map a lot. I'll explain it here in a second again for anyone that might be new. After that, we're going to discuss some of our ensembles and some of the differences there. And then we're going to kind of get into the meat and potatoes, if you will, of all of this and really break down what each model shows and what those impacts could be for your area, including the chance of maybe some severe weather, a lot of rain, a lot of wind we'll talk about, and also some of the models overnight indicating maybe some snow on the horizon as well that maybe we weren't quite expecting this time yesterday. So with all that said, I'm going to take a sip of coffee here, and then we're going to dive right into it. Okay, awesome. Love to see it. Okay, let's get started here. So, taking a look at our latest European model's 500 millibar height relative vorticity map, and again, what this really shows is just where are we seeing lift in the atmosphere, or where are we seeing energy kind of interacting. So again, right now, here's that big cutoff upper level system that we've been talking about. That's what's bringing that precipitation to sections of the southern plains. Now, as we move this ahead through the next couple of days, that will likely push off towards the east. And again, that's why that rain shield will move east with it. Now, as this is happening, this is that Clipper system up in Canada. You'll notice that kind of flew out of the Pacific and eventually gets up into the northern plains here. So we have that piece of energy. We have our main piece of energy, our upper level low. And then we also have some energy down here in that subtropical jet that we saw on satellite this morning. We saw that very evident plume of moisture down there. Now, as I move this ahead in time, it's going to be very important exactly how do these three pieces of energy work in tandem. Our latest European model kind of begins to phase those two northern pieces of energy first, and then eventually dive south and scoop up that southern piece of energy, and all of that together is going to lead to plenty of ripe atmospheric conditions for a very strong storm system to develop over sections of the Florida Gulf and into the Carolinas going into this weekend. And then even the Euro shows after that a kind of final piece of energy flying south out of Canada, and this one is a cold piece of energy. What I mean by that is it's bringing cold air with it, which is very different than our other three pieces of energy. So should this happen, we could potentially get some snow on the backside of this storm system, and we'll definitely have to watch that and watch those trends, as it's something that our European model is pretty confident in. Okay, now as for the the GFS model, we just looked at the European. Moving this ahead in time, again, here's our three pieces of energy, our main one here in the middle, our northern piece, and our southern piece. The GFS model kind of works a little bit differently here, but in general, the same kind of idea. The main difference is the GFS kind of phases the two southern pieces of energy before the two northern pieces of energy, and then kind of, brings it all together come Sunday afternoon over the southeastern United States. Now, I'll discuss here in a second why that will have different impacts from each model and kind of show different solutions, but they both do agree, and then the GFS also does bring a kind of final northern cold piece of energy later on, just in a different place and kind of at a different strength level as well. Alrighty, so that's kind of the vorticity map. Now I'm going to show you one more map, or I guess it's two more maps, but it's the same map, just from different models. This is our ensembles showing where they think center of low pressure is going to develop and track with all of these pieces of energy. So again, right now, they all pretty much agree. Like I talked about earlier, we've got very strong high pressure sitting over the eastern United States. That's why we have such clear, nice conditions right now, and will continue to for the next couple of days. Now, kind of moving this ahead over time, our Euro ensemble members, you'll notice, begin to develop that surface low pressure kind of down here in the Gulf of Mexico. And eventually, this is, by the way, I should add Saturday evening, and going into our Sunday, kind of move that low pressure inland into Florida, going into Sunday morning and afternoon, and eventually into the Carolinas, going into Sunday evening and Monday morning. And one thing I'll mention here is, it might be hard to kind of read some of these numbers, but this is not just your kind of ordinary low pressure that we get this time of year. This is very strong low pressure. If we're averaging all of the ensemble members together over one area, it's still sub 1,000 millibars, but many of these individual ensemble members have this low pressure getting down below 990, and even a couple below 980. And that's a kind of pressure that you don't really just brush off and say, okay, well, this is just going to bring some rain. That's the kind of pressure that brings a lot of wind energy both above our heads and at the surface. So this would lead to very gusty wind conditions, very strong wind shear, and just a lot of energy, and unfortunately a lot of problems at the surface. If this were to unfold this way, I'll just say right now, we will have big time power outage problems in the Carolinas, and I'll talk about that a little bit more here going later on into the video. So again, this is going into Sunday evening. As I move this ahead, going into Monday morning and Monday afternoon, you'll notice that low pressure continues to move up the coast and then into the northeast by the time we're getting into Monday afternoon and into Monday evening, before after that, kind of a bit of a colder air mass tries to move in. And potentially maybe another low pressure could form off of that boundary, but getting a little ahead of ourselves with that. One thing I will mention, though, that is kind of some good news. There's a lot of bad news in the overnight model runs in terms of severity of impacts, but some good news is I do think the storm system is more likely to keep on moving than what we saw yesterday. Yesterday, a lot of the models had it kind of stalling out a little bit. I think today they're in more agreement that this, although unfortunately will be quite a strong storm system, should keep on moving and likely not stall out too long, although, it might feel like it a little bit. I'll talk about that later on as well. Alright, so that was our Euro ensemble members. Let's take a look at our GFS ensemble members and where it takes this low pressure. Starts with the same general idea, low pressure forming at the surface here Saturday afternoon and evening in the Gulf, before eventually moving into Florida, going into the early morning hours of Sunday. Now the GFS ensemble members are shifted a little bit further off to the north and to the west here, where the Euro ensembles were clustered a little bit more kind of in central Florida. The GFS is more of a Florida panhandle kind of storm. So definitely some differences there, and that could, of course, affect impacts location by location. But what they do agree on, though, is going into kind of our early Monday morning, this storm system continues to strengthen over the Carolinas, and again, plenty of members showing pressure below 990 millibars here into sections of the Carolinas. So same general idea as the European model, just maybe slightly different in terms of the placement of this low. GFS also does agree that this continues to work up the coast and shouldn't meander for too long, and also likely a bit of a colder air mass tries to move in going into the middle of next week behind it. All right, so now that we've talked about kind of, I guess, more of the boring stuff, let's break down some of the potential impacts with this storm system, starting off with our operational European model. Now, moving this ahead into time, again, you'll notice here's that low pressure beginning to develop Saturday afternoon down in the Gulf of Mexico, just like its ensemble member showed. Now, as I move this ahead into time, you'll notice here it comes, eventually working into Florida and kind of, I don't want to say making landfall because it's not a tropical storm, but the impacts will feel very similar. So might as well say making landfall here somewhere kind of in the north central part of the Florida Peninsula. And as this is ongoing, likely very heavy rainfall ongoing with this storm system, and also, unfortunately, very strong, I don't want to say storm surge, but coastal flooding likely ongoing as well here on the north east quadrant of this storm system. So early Sunday morning, we could see some very strong onshore flow into the Carolinas. A place like Charleston, I know, unfortunately, just floods crazy easy, and that's one of those places I'm, again, concerned about with this setup. Could see very strong onshore flow going into the early hours of Sunday before the storm system continues to strengthen over land here and moves further inland into the Carolinas. And by the time we're into Sunday afternoon, we've got potentially a sub 985 millibar low sitting right over the heart of South Carolina and continuing to move further inland up into the Charlotte area, and then gets even below 980 millibars. Now, this would be quite unprecedented. It's not very often that we see storm systems get this strong and this deep over the Carolinas this time of year. In fact, this would be a little more common if this was a hurricane coming ashore. But with these Miller A systems, it's much more common that they're kind of weaker down here and then strengthen as they ride up the coast. And then the Northeast kind of gets these stronger millibar low pressure systems. But just the way that the atmosphere is going to be set up this weekend, the storm system is going to have very conducive environment to continue to deepen and allow this very low pressure. Now again, this is Sunday afternoon on the latest European model, and this would bring widespread power outages, widespread flooding, coastal flooding, and potentially even a bit of a small severe weather threat as well. Another thing you'll also notice here on this, kind of hard to tell here, but there's a little bit of pink showing up here in the North Carolina mountains. It is very possible that should this occur, enough cold air above our heads could get pulled down by this upper level low that we could see maybe rain changing over to a wet, heavy snow sometime overnight Sunday into the Western Carolina mountains. Not out of the question. Again, this storm, though, it's going to bring a little bit of everything and continues to strengthen overnight Sunday into Monday as it finally rides up the coast into New England and brings its impacts that way. Now, another thing you'll notice going into Monday afternoon is look at these blue isobars beginning to kink kind of here off towards the west of the storm system itself. This is a very strong punch of cold air that could potentially, again, this is just one model, but a very reliable model at that, could potentially wrap around and dive very quickly off towards the south and to the east, bringing with it colder weather and potentially a very potent northwest flow event on the backside of this going later into Monday and into Tuesday. Which, honestly, if the European model from last night were to unfold even relatively close to what it's showing, we're going to have a storm system that a lot of people probably remember for a while just due to the lasting wind impacts, the lasting rain, and some people, maybe even the lasting snow impacts in those higher elevations. So this is a very dynamic storm, and these are impacts that are going to be even worse likely than we saw last weekend for many folks here into the Carolinas, up into sections of the mid-Atlantic. All right. That's the European model. Let's take a look now at the GFS and see what it's showing. I'm going to use a different map here and kind of zoom in a little bit, just because I think Tropical Tidbits does a bit of a better job here with the GFS model. But let me back this up a little bit. Again, same story here, and also, if you're looking for the time, it's going to be up here in the top right-hand corner of your screen. That's going to be local Eastern time, and that should tell you your day and your time. Okay. All right. Sorry, this video, I'm sure, is going to go very long, but it's just a lot of information to get through here. So again, our GFS model from overnight agrees with the European. We've got low pressure beginning to develop down here into the Gulf of Mexico and beginning to deepen as it moves towards the Florida coastline. Now going into overnight, this is 7 o'clock Saturday night. You'll notice very strong low pressure now moving ashore into Florida, bringing with it very heavy rain and gusty winds as well. Eventually, this moves up into Georgia and the Western Carolinas overnight Saturday, continuing to strengthen, bringing very strong onshore flow. Again, that's going to cause coastal flooding issues. Both of our models agree with that. Also, just very strong PWatt values, or just a big plume of moisture out of the Atlantic off the Gulf Stream into the Carolinas. And a lot of that's going to smack up against these ridges of the mountains, and we're going to wring out some big-time moisture totals with a solution like this. Now, moving this ahead, again, the low pressure continues to deepen, and we've got a 985 millibar low right over the Western Carolinas, over the Greenville, Spartanburg, Asheville area. Again, that wind continuing to pick up here. And also, the GFS, now like the Euro, is showing maybe we change over to some wet, heavy snow into the higher peaks of western North Carolina as we get just enough cold air above us that the solution could occur. Now, also going into overnight Sunday into Monday now, still that very strong onshore flow continues. Severe weather threat could be possible here into the coastal regions of North Carolina going into our Sunday afternoon. And eventually, the storm continues to ride up the coastline and bringing those impacts into the northeast. Now, the GFS does also agree that we get this kind of troughing to try to work down behind the storm system, which could again bring a shot of some snowy weather on the backside. GFS brings it more into the northeast than into the southeastern Appalachian Mountains, but they are both agreeing that we could get some back-end snow out of this before things finally clear out going into the middle of next week, right around December 20th or the 21st. Okay, so next map I'm going to show you here are some wind gust projections from our latest European model overnight, and I'm just going to go ahead and jump right into it here. So this is going into Sunday morning and into Sunday afternoon. You'll notice things still relatively calm, but beginning to go downhill Sunday morning for your commute to church. Now, as we go into Sunday afternoon, this is when things get downright dangerous for a lot of folks. Winds gusting well past tropical storm strength here into the low country of South Carolina, into the sand hills of North Carolina, and eventually going into Sunday evening, we've got widespread tropical storm conditions, at least wind-wise, across much of the Carolinas. And I'll tell you from personal experience, growing up in South Carolina and living there about really 90-95% of my life, this is plenty enough wind combined with that rain to bring down plenty of Carolina pine trees, and this is going to just quite honestly have big-time power outages should this occur. Really, it is quite concerning for a lot of folks. And I want you to be prepared because this is one of those storm systems that I'm sure you're going to see a lot of hype everywhere, and you might think maybe the boy who cried wolf, but this is one that could have big-time impacts going throughout the day Sunday into overnight Sunday and into early Monday with prolonged tropical storm strength wind gusts for 12, maybe even 18 hours on end. So again, this is Sunday afternoon, those winds picking up. Going into overnight Sunday, those winds remain strong across much of the region here through the mid-Atlantic, also picking up into Virginia and really picking up into those North Carolina higher peaks. Now, going into overnight Sunday into the early morning hours of Monday, luckily things calm down a bit, but still plenty breezy during the afternoon hours of Monday, and could pick up once again should we get that trough to move through on the backside. But really the worst of the wind here, I think, is Sunday afternoon and into the overnight Sunday as well. Now, looking at the northeast and wind impacts possible up here, honestly, this is, again, one of those kind of backward storm systems. Oftentimes, the worst of the winds are up in the northeast, and the storm system kind of strengthens as it rides up the coast. This one's a little different. Again, strongest time that the storm is over the southeast, so very different than what we're kind of used to in these Miller A setups. Either way, though, winds will still be a problem in the northeast. I just think the northeast is a little more accustomed to these sorts of winds, maybe compared to our friends down in the southeast. Anyway, though, again, this is going into the about midnight hour of Sunday. You'll see these winds beginning to pick up off towards the south, towards the mid-Atlantic, and eventually really cranking up going into the early morning hours of Monday with very strong onshore flow here, bringing potentially some coastal flooding issues, but definitely some strong winds nonetheless into coastal New Jersey, into Long Island, and then eventually up into New England during the afternoon hours of Monday. And that continues into overnight Monday before we calm down for our Tuesday. So again, very impressive potential wind impacts out of this. Now we've talked about the wind impacts, let's talk about the potential for some snow. I'm sure a lot of folks are probably hoping for snow out of this one. It is basically Christmas week, this will be just about. So let's kind of go ahead and move this ahead. This is our latest European ensemble members showing their thoughts on some snowfall chances. And you'll notice going into Sunday evening and into early Monday, some of our ensemble members are picking up at the chance that maybe, as we talked about, some of that heavy rain switches to a heavy wet snow during the overnight hours of Sunday into Monday. Now, moving this further ahead into Monday afternoon and evening and into Tuesday overnight, as that punching of cold air comes in on the backside, our European ensemble members really agree that we could get some snow here. And these are pretty high percent chances of seeing at least an inch of snow, above 70% in the West Virginia mountains, and generally above 50% through much of the North Carolina and Virginia mountains. So pretty high confidence here in the European model, and it even shows chances up into the Ohio River Valley, back towards excuse me if I can think of directions here, back towards eastern Kentucky and eastern Tennessee, even having the chance at maybe some snow here. And those chances continue to even push into the mid-Atlantic going into overnight Tuesday. You'll notice much of the state of Virginia here clocking in at about a 10 to 20% chance of accumulating snowfall on the back end of the storm system. And it's definitely not out of the question, but this is a part of the storm we're really going to have to wait to iron out those details, as it's just very difficult to forecast snowfall with these upper level lows. Now, snowfall chances will slowly taper off from there, and by the time we get into later next week, those chances are back down to really about zero. As for the Northeast, what are the chances through this region of seeing some snow? Well, again, the European says the best shot of it is going to be overnight Tuesday here and into Wednesday afternoon through much of the Northeast, and even into our Wednesday potentially and Thursday, as we could get some low pressure to reform and kind of hang around for a little while. However, though, the chance is not off the charts here in the Northeast by any means. In fact, I think, funnily enough, the Europeans are a little more confident about southern Appalachia snow than it is about interior Northeast snow. Now, it's not the same for all models. Our GFS ensemble members, if we take a look at its chances of snowfall, you'll notice going into that same time period, really not nearly as excited about the chances of snow. Still does show some snow chances up into the West Virginia mountains, but areas further south of there that the Europeans very excited about, GFS is showing a whole lot of nothing really, and kind of clears out any snow chances by the middle of next week. As for the Northeast, GFS is a little more excited about this area for some snow. You'll notice kind of up here into the Finger Lakes and the Catskills of New York State, showing some higher chances of snowfall. Again, this during about next Tuesday to Wednesday, as we could get some leftover precipitation interacting with that colder air before, again, those chances die down going later on into next week. Okay, so that's the snowfall. One more thing we're going to talk about, then I'll let you go. I promise. This video going to get pretty close to 30 minutes here, it looks like. But let's talk about some flooding problems. This is as far out as the Weather Prediction Center goes right now, is to day 3. And you'll notice we definitely have the chance of some flash flooding issues through much of Florida for our Saturday. And going into our Sunday, expect this to also include the Carolinas, but we'll be able to show that map tomorrow. Now, why am I pretty confident about flooding here? Well, the overall rainfall totals here over the next couple of days, to just take a quick look at this, a lot of rain is coming towards the southeast going into this week. And in fact, widespread 2 to 4 inches of rain through the entire Florida Peninsula, into the really entire state of Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and into Virginia, all the way up the I-95 corridor into Maine. Likely a lot of rain on the way here. And we could even overdo these totals, honestly. If we get some of these onshore bands of rain to really kind of train over the same areas, some places are easily going to get half a foot of rain out of this storm system. That combined with all that wind, it's going to be a real mess around much of the Carolinas going into later this weekend. So again, just to kind of recap here, we got a real whopper of a storm coming, to be quite honest with you folks, with a lot of wind, maybe some snow, but definitely a lot of rain, coastal flooding, the potential for severe weather, really a whole lot of everything ongoing with this storm system. So again, we'll definitely iron out those details going into this weekend. I will let you know, maybe tomorrow, if not tomorrow, definitely Saturday, I'm probably going to post 2 separate videos. One on kind of this normal format, and then for all my friends in the Carolinas where I'm from, I definitely like forecasting for that area. I'll probably have a more in-depth guide to just the Carolina impacts of this storm going into Sunday through early next week. So just be on the watch for that throughout the next couple of days. With that said, though, again, I hope you have a great rest of your Thursday out there, and I'll see you all tomorrow.